There may be cases where a vehicle has had its original molex plug for the stereo cut off, either due to a theft or a previous bad install. It is our job to identify the wires of this cut harness and match them up to the new stereo being installed. We will do this by using our multimeter to test the wires. We will also be using what's called a reverse harness to replace the factory molex plug. This reverse harness will bring back the factory look of the car's original molex plug and also give the regular harness a plug to connect into. For this install, you will need a multimeter, 1 amp fuse, a few feet of primary wire, AA battery, and a reverse harness. Let's first start by disconnecting the negative terminal of the battery to avoid any accidental short circuits. Next, take the cut harness, and if the wires are not all the same length, cut them across evenly for a more professional appearance. Strip back each wire about a ½ inch and connect butt connectors to all the wires in the vehicle harness. This does two things for us. First, it preps the wires for the reverse harness, and second, it electrically isolates the wires from each other. That way, when we connect the battery's negative terminal, the wires will not touch and blow a fuse. Now that we have prepped the harness, we will need to reconnect the negative battery terminal so that we may test the wires for proper identification. The wires we will be looking for in this section are 12-volt constant, illumination, ignition switched, ground, power antenna, and speaker output wires. There is an order in which to locate these wires. Following the orders will help avoid making mistakes and possible damage to the vehicle. Set your multimeter to the volts DC setting and ground the negative terminal of the multimeter. This wire will show 12 volts at all times regardless of vehicle key cylinder position. With the positive test lead, probe the connections in the harness. Look for the wire that shows 12 volts on your meter. When the circuit is located, connect this to the yellow wire on the reverse harness. If you cannot find a 12-volt constant source, check the vehicle fuses and replace as necessary. With the key in the cylinder still in the off position, turn on the vehicle lights and turn the dimmer switch all the way up. Then probe every wire until you find a 12-volt source. Once you have located a 12-volt source, this could either be the main illumination wire or the vehicle's illumination dimmer wire. So with the test probe still measuring the circuit, adjust the dimmer switch. Is there a change in voltage on your meter? If yes, that is your illumination dimmer wire. Connect it to the correct wire on the reverse harness. The other wire that shows 12 volts but is not changed with the dimmer is the illumination wire. You can verify this wire by turning the lights off and on and watching the voltage go from 0 to 12 on your meter. Connect this wire to the illumination wire on the reverse harness. Some vehicles may or may not have a dimmer or illumination wires behind the head unit, so don't worry if you cannot find these wires. Although, if you do not find these wires, it is wise to check the fuses for these circuits and make sure they are not blown. The ignition switched wire will only show 12 volts when the key cylinder is in the accessory or run position. To test the circuit, turn the key to the accessory position. Probe each wire until you see a 12-volt signal. Once you have found the circuit, verify it by cycling the key to the accessory position, from off and then to on. Your meter should jump from 0 to 12 volts whenever the accessory position is reached. Once the circuit is verified, connect into the red wire on the reverse harness. With the key in the off position, set your meter to the ground confirmation setting. This setting will cause your multimeter to beep when a ground circuit is present. Contact the remaining wires for ground. On your meter, you will hear an audible beep when the ground circuit is located. Just as a caution, turn your vehicle lights on and off. We do this because your vehicle light circuits rest at ground, and sometimes these two wires can look very similar to a meter. Once verified, connect it to the black wire on the reverse harness. This completes the input section of the stereo. We will now identify output circuits on the car vehicle. There are two types of power antenna circuits: positive switched and negative switched. Let's first attempt to locate the negative switch power antenna. Grab some primary wire, connect one end of the primary wire to ground, and probe the remaining wires. If you see the power antenna rise, you have a negative power antenna type. Since your aftermarket stereo has a positive antenna output, you will need to use a relay to convert the signal to a negative output. In most cases, the majority of power antennas are positive switched. If your antenna did not activate with a negative current, let's activate your positive antenna now. Grab some primary wire and a 1 amp fuse and create a temporary fuse holder by using 2 female disconnects in line with the primary wire. Insert one end of the wire into the constant 12 on the harness, and with the other end, probe the remaining wires. When your antenna starts to rise, you will know that you have hit your positive antenna. The reason we insert a fuse is so if we happen to probe a ground circuit, we will only blow a fuse and not the constant 12 volt we are temporarily using. So at this time, watch for the power antenna to rise. Once you have located the correct circuit, connect the power antenna power lead to the blue wire in the reverse harness. Be advised, not all vehicles are equipped with a motorized antenna. To find your speaker wires, you will need a multimeter and a AA battery to pop the speakers. Set your multimeter to the ohm setting. Insert one end of the test lead into any of the remaining wires, and with the other test lead, probe each wire down the line until you see a 4 ohm or a 2 ohm reading. These readings will indicate that you have found the positive and negative terminals on a speaker's voice coils. Take your battery speaker popper and pop these 2 wires. You should hear a speaker pop. The speaker pop reveals that these 2 wires are indeed speakers, and it also reveals the location of the speaker. Example, rear right or front left. So if you hear the front right speaker pop, connect those wires to the front right speaker outputs on the reverse harness. But here's the tricky part. Which one of these factory wires is a positive and which one is a negative? If you can visually see the speaker pop, pay close attention to the direction of the cone travel. If it moves outwards, then you have the correct polarity. If inward, then switch to battery wires. It then should pop outwards when testing. Follow the AA's battery tip positive side to the factory wire. That wire is the positive. Connect it to the positive speaker wire on the reverse harness, then connect the other factory speaker wire to the negative on the reverse harness. Let's move on to the next speaker. Once again, probe any wire with a positive test lead and probe any of the remaining wires with the negative test lead. When you see a speaker resistance reading, again follow the same procedure as before. You can also search for speaker voice coils by setting your meter to the continuity beep setting. This dial gives you an audible sound when the voice coils have been found. To use this method, contact any of the remaining wires in the harness and probe the other wires with the other test probe. When you find the speaker's voice coils, the multimeter would beep. This indicates 2 voice coils that belong to each other. Using the meter beep function or the ohm function is about preference. Remember, if you connect the speaker's polarities incorrectly, you won't mess anything up, but the sound from your speakers will sound out of phase and will sound less full and powerful. After you have connected all speakers and power wires, test the unit to see if it powers on. If not, check the fuses and voltage behind the head unit for power. When testing the unit, make sure to check the system's fade and balance. Make sure that the speakers fade and balance to the correct side. Also, make sure that all the speakers are working.